I don't want to become someone who knows all the right things to do, but is wretched. And that was my experience as a pastor's kid growing up in the non-denominational world. I was sick to my stomach about how much I knew, but how little I could do. I wasn't becoming a more loving husband or a more faithful Christian. I was doing all the right things, but I felt powerless. I
Mm.
couldn't find the transformation I was looking for. And it wasn't until I encountered the Orthodox Church that I began to experience a rhythm of sacramental life. In the East, we call it their mysteries, the divine mysteries.
Hmm.
So we participate in these mysteries. Well, it's just like weightlifting. Isn't that a mystery? I move some stuff around and suddenly I get stronger. Like, how does that? I don't know how it works, but if I do it, it produces the results and I am changed. I become more than what I was.
So, as I've recently announced on this channel, I am formally entering into the Orthodox Church, God willing. And one of the people who has greatly helped me with that, and there are a few, is Nolan Brown. And today I decided to have him on to discuss a book that we both read together called The Freedom of Morality by Christos Yannaras. And this book was incredibly revealing and impactful in terms of understanding the spirit of the Eastern Orthodox Church and its manifestation of Jesus Christ here on earth. And Nolan is somebody who opened my mind to Orthodoxy in such a tremendous way over a year ago when I had an initial meeting with him inquiring about the faith. He's a graduate student in theological studies and a candidate for ordination to the diaconate in the Eastern Orthodox Church. And his work is rooted in pastoral concern for the lived reality of persons, exploring Orthodox anthropology and moral theology as paths of healing, maturation, and communion, rather than as abstract moral systems or juridical frameworks. Nolan is the host of Parish Life podcast and has worked with parish communities across the country to help them share the life of the church through storytelling and video production. He lives in Colorado with his wife and children, where he continues his studies, writing, and service in the church. You can find a link to his podcast in the description. I suggest that you go check that out and enjoy this discussion of the freedom of morality. And we'll see you again next time. I'm going to keep making videos to share my journey of learning. Converting to Orthodoxy is an identity shift.
Absolutely.
It's not something that it's not something I've ever experienced. So it's
Mm.
requiring me to reshape my entire worldview and only bring forward those things that are truly in the vine, so to speak,
Mm.
which I
Mm.
don't even know what all of those things that are in the vine, like what's in alignment with my faith now and what's not in
Mm.
alignment. So I
Sure.
think this conversation will help with that.
Yeah.
And the book
Yeah.
is, I'm holding it up for our audience, The Freedom of Morality. I'm here with my dear friend and
Don't judge a
Orthodox
book by its
brother.
cover.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's by Christos Yannaras, and forgive
Mm.
me if I butchered that, but he's a pretty prominent Greek Orthodox theologian in
Mm.
terms of modern theologians. And the way I came across this book was I had done some research on my own on the origins of consciousness. I published a
Mm.
paper on it in the International Journal of Jungian Studies. And my dissertation for my PhD was very focused on the origins of consciousness. And as I became more Christ centered, I wanted to find orthodox content that could help me bridge what I had learned previously about philosophies
Mm.
of consciousness and my own inclinations towards seeing consciousness as
Mm.
primary rather than secondary, meaning, a lot of people think of consciousness as what's called an epiphenomenon in
Mm.
philosophy, which means that it sort of arises out of matter or it arises out of complex interactions and then it becomes
Mm.
its own thing. I always had the tendency, at least in the last decade or so, to invert that and philosophically explore what would it mean if consciousness was primary, and would it actually
Mm,
possibly make more sense than it would to say that material reality gave rise to our experiences of life, right? And that's
interesting.
very
Yeah.
compatible with the logos as
Hmm. Hmm.
Christ, because you're looking at his personhood as primary, which of course
Right.
is whatever consciousness is. It ultimately emanates or is given to us from Christ,
Totally.
from the Creator. So I brought you on, as I mentioned in
Mm.
the introduction, because you're an expert in this subject. During our first meeting,
Cool. Now
we
you've set the bar high now with that with the E word. I don't know.
well,
We'll see.
forgive me. I hate to do that to you. But in my eyes, in my probably flawed opinion, you're an expert. Um,
It's kind of you. Thank you.
yeah. And the reason I say that is because when we first met, you basically outlined this book, having never read
Mm.
it.
Mm.
Now, I don't want to be hyperbolic. It's not like
Sure.
you dotted every I and crossed every T, and you knew
Sure.
everything that Yannaras said in this book, but your general instinct about what morality really is was
Mm.
completely in alignment with this book and
Mm.
helped me open up to orthodoxy. So I guess what I want to say is when I suggested you to read this, you said this is possibly the best Orthodox book I've ever read, as one of your comments. And
Yeah.
as somebody who is definitely more experienced by far in Orthodox Christianity than I am, I want to give
Mm.
you the floor and ask you, what did this book do that you feel like is valuable
Mm.
for Orthodox Christians and inquirers to know? And not so much in a systematic analysis of like
Sure. Yeah.
taking it apart, but what impacted you? What impressions
Yeah.
did it leave you with that were impactful?
Well, I mean, I would say, well, first off, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and our relationship growing over the last year or so.
Me too, brother.
And this book really, for me, gave me a lot of comfort and confidence that my own personal experience and ideation of what it is to journey into maturation with Christ and the language that I had used for it and had just come up with on my own wasn't innovative in the sense that I'm coming up with some new doctrine that might actually be heretical or something. It's very I have a great degree of respect now that I am an Orthodox Christian for adhering to the faith that is and not trying to be innovative. That's something that can lead to deep temptation, drastic temptations and heresies over and even schisms over the years is when we start to become self-referential. So I had never heard anyone articulate the the journey of what it is to grow in Christ, what it is to navigate our condition, what it is to grapple with morality, and ultimately work out our salvation with fear and trembling, as St. Paul said, until I had read this book that you recommended. And it absolutely has inspired me to actually write a book of my own on the same subject, but maybe a little more approachable to the common person who isn't going to pick up something that's extremely academic or very highly theological in its tone. So
It is pretty
something I'd always
technical.
it is pretty, and some of the chapters are very dry. He goes off into like some different
Hmm.
themes that I don't particularly resonate, but overall, I can see how there's continuity across those topics. But yeah, I would say to bring it back to why should people at least encounter these concepts, whether it be by reading this book, if they've got the desire to delve into that level of thinking, or whether it's something like what I hope to produce. I think that it really orients us towards relationship and towards an ontological or a to not use too big of words because that's my MO is I try to make things very approachable. In fact, I was working with my 8-year-old today and walking through the different chapters of the book and saying, can he understand what I'm talking about?
Hmm.
This book has the potential to keep the how do I say this that ontological or the mode of existence this having to do with how we exist and
Hmm.
becoming rather than this abstraction of, well, are we good or are we bad based on our behavior? I think that is frankly the greatest tension between what a lot of us in the West have encountered in Christianity, that is very different in Eastern Christianity. In East, it's about healing, it's about growth. Whereas in the West, there tends to be a more juridical or justice oriented approach of right and wrong, good and bad. So I think it's very healing and very helpful to encounter these thoughts.
There's this distinction made early in the book
Mm.
between a person and an
Yeah,
individual.
love
And
that.
it speaks to what you're saying. I think that a lot of Christianity in the West, and forgive me as someone who's a novice in Christian studies, but
Mm,
it seems to me that a lot of Christianity in the West is very individualistic,
mm,
meaning Christ is a possession of moral fortitude and
mm,
promise that is going to deliver us so that we as individuals can be saved from
mhm.
things that we don't want to experience. In
Right.
essence, it's not about kenosis, which is self-emptying,
Mhm,
but it's actually about becoming more what he calls sort of egocentric or more
mhm.
individually partitioned, which is
Yeah.
actually not the gospel message, right? The gospel
Right.
message is that you find yourself through giving yourself away, that
Mhm,
you're born again by dying, that your
mhm,
life is actually gained by totally emptying into this idea of what he's terming personhood. How did that
mhm.
idea of personhood map on to your understanding of Eastern Christianity?
Yeah. It's essential, like something you said earlier, this idea of consciousness being primary, and then from that comes all things, and you tied it back to the logos. That ties into the Orthodox dogma, if you will, of creation ex nihilo, or out of non-existence. God draws things out of non-existence towards existence because he is ultimate existence. But what we see God is a community of persons. So even in our Trinitarian theology, like who we see God is a fascinating it correlates to a good marriage. Like when you get married, you should not cease to be who you are. You shouldn't be absorbed into the other, but you should become more than what you would be by yourself. And so that mystery that we see there, where we don't lose ourselves in the relationship, but rather our experience enhances and expands. That I think is the key with personhood. Is the Greek word prosopon is like a face or a mask. It was originally like a theatrical term, and it was the fathers of the church, as they worked through their Trinitarian theology, that actually took that word and expanded it into what we now think of as being a person, of having this. It's not individuality, it is a connection with the other. It's to have a face that can be beheld. In other words, I think it was Metropolitan Callistos Ware that said, I cannot be myself without you. We are designed for union with God and neighbor. And that's the two greatest commandments: love God with everything you are, and love your neighbor as yourself. Everything else hangs on those. So when we think about that, I've become someone who very much avoids using the word individual in any context, because I just see it as a diminishing of what it is to be a human being. When you've become an individual, it's a mathematical term for being no longer able to be divided. You are individual. You've been reduced to your lowest state of existence before you don't exist anymore.
Hmm.
And if you were divided once again, you'd be gone. So that's hell, actually, to be utterly alone and cut off from everyone. So to be an individual, it kind of resonates with this idea of autonomy and the sense of freedom, which is, I think, the noble aspect. Like we're autonomy, we're not encumbered. But I think that there's a dark side to it, which is we're also horribly alone and cut off. I think that in the West, my experience of my relationship with Christ uh, took that word personal, and that's tricky because we often hear the phrase "my personal Lord and Savior." And I actually did an Instagram reel on this a couple of years ago about the idea that that it's a personal relationship, not because it's private, not because it's my own personal, like a personal pan pizza. When I was a kid at Pizza Hut, you get the book it program, and you'd go in and you'd get your own little personal pizza that was yours and nobody else's. That's not what we mean when we mean personal. We mean it's between persons.
Hmm.
It's dynamic. It's communal.
Communal.
Yeah. So I
And,
think
and
that's huge.
it is huge, and I think it's worth parsing a bit more. One of the things that it's useful to know is this is not an easy book to find. I think last I
Mhm.
checked, the Amazon shopping options were actually out of stock currently.
Oh
So
wow.
we got like the last two copies, or at least somewhere thereabouts,
That's
because there weren't
amazing.
very. Yeah. So if you're interested, you might want to go look in other places. I don't know if certain parishes will sell this book, or
Mm.
monasteries, or what, or how that would work, but. The reason I bring that up is because I think we owe it to the audience to really be very clear about what this book is
Yeah.
doing right off the bat with morality and personhood.
Sure. Sure.
Um, because you touched on it, but I don't want to make it. I don't want it to be vague.
Yeah.
This idea of personhood, and you correct me if I go astray at all, but to me, it's exactly what you said about the communal effort to participate in self-giving in a way that is unique to your relationship to Christ, but in
Mm.
a way that is inverting the idea of self-gratification. And it's like it turns from gratifying self, that the gratifying Christ becomes the goal, but
Mm.
it's not in a sense of moral obligation
Right.
where you're trying to justify your existence and make sure that you're not punished.
Mm.
And I think that one of the things he does well very early on is show that our ideas about morality function through this reward and punishment lens that is very
Hmm.
Western. And it
Hmm.
also functions through this individualistic idea of personal, or sorry, excuse me, I should be careful with my language, individualistic moral justification,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is to say that, Lord, Lord, did I not do this in your name, and do that in your name, and
Right.
heal people and feed people? And and in a sense, it's about what I did and how I justified my own individualistic existence, and then I got to pat myself on the back and call myself a good person,
Right.
and or live my life in fear
Mm.
on the other side of being bad. And
Exactly.
how to basically what I feel like he's saying in this book is our culture has this version of heretical Christian sociology, which
Mm.
basically reifies this false moral structure, which is about justification rather than participation. Fill in
Hmm.
the gaps, expand on that, correct me where I went wrong, anything.
Could do an entire weekend retreat or seminar on this topic. It's amazing. So a few things come to mind. I think the very first one is there's another great book, Discourses and Sayings by Dorotheos of Gaza, that I recommend to everyone pick up and read. I read it many years ago and probably should reread it again. But Dorotheos of Gaza talks about this journey that we all go on in our relationship with God. And he has three phases to it. The first being slave, the second being servant, and then the final being son. And the interesting thing is that God doesn't change at all through that journey. It's our orientation towards him and our framing of what it means to be in relationship with him that matures and expands and evolves. And I think that what we see is that there is a there's a level, the beginning level, where we are afraid of punishment. We are afraid that we're bad. And I think St. Paul talks about this in the sense that when he says, like, look, the law wasn't bad, it was a guardian. It gave us a sense of bearing on that there is a good and an evil. Like we needed to participate in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil for ourselves to mature. It wasn't ever intended that we remain without knowledge, that we remain immature. We needed to grow. We needed to become like God. That's the entire journey of what it is to be a human, is to be unified with him and to mature, to go from glory to glory. So what the law did is it gave us the understanding that there is good and evil. There is this idea of maturing and immature, or being healthy or not healthy, or like there is this continuum. And so what that orients us to then is initially we think, oh, then I am afraid of the bad and I want the good, but we're not thinking in relational terms, we're thinking in consequence punishment terms. And that's the slave mode. And I think that when we remain immature relationally, we stay in that slave modality. And I see this even within my marriage, right? Like as a young married person, my initial thought was, well, if I just do all the right things, she'll be happy, you know? And so then, and then the honeymoon wears off and all your ugly patterns and habits start coming out and the friction points start to occur. And you realize that doesn't work. You can't just do things, check boxes. It doesn't work anymore. She's like, that's I want you to show up in relationship. So when we're in this slave ideology, it's very focused on justice, it's very focused on punishment, it's fear driven. And I think a lot of the substitutionary atonement, a lot of the hyper focus on the crucifixion as what saved us rather than the incarnation and all of the actions of Christ's life
The
culminating in
conquering of death.
resurrection.
Right.
Right, right. We only think about the cross. We don't think about the rest of it. But when you start thinking about this through an ontological and relational lens, suddenly the entire life of Christ becomes the way. It becomes the path to actually being unified with God and neighbor and experiencing transformation. So then the next level up is servant. Well, the servant serves out of his desire to honor the master, no longer out of fear, but out of honor. And then the son eventually does it out of love. And
Mm.
so that's like as we evolve, our motivation changes. We're afraid as a slave, and then we want to honor God because we know he's a good God. He's not going to punish us. And then the final step is we realize we can't earn it. We do this out of love. And so it's very fascinating to see that. And it's in that final state that we actually truly enter into that self-emptying approach, that kenotic love. And we're able to then, I mean, that's obviously there's a continuum even within these of an ongoing and never-ending journey. I'll stop there because I've been going for a while, but that's I think a really good layer to what you were talking about.
The example of marriage is really approachable and
Mm,
relatable because it's so true that we can approach our spouse from the standpoint of behavior, right?
hmm
Hey,
hmm
I mowed the lawn. I took out the trash. I took you on a date Tuesday night. What are you upset about? I'm doing
Right.
all like you're saying you don't feel like I'm here, but like I've been doing all the things. That distinction right there is such a simple way to understand this. It's like we all know what it feels like to
Right.
be with someone and feel like they're not really there with us, or to
Absolutely.
be heard but not really listened to, or to
Yeah.
be viewed but not really seen.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think Christ wants all of us. Christ wants us to see him and to be seen by him. And if we are
hmm
just carrying our Christian lives as this sort of, only compunction in objective based behavioral justification, then we're really missing the point.
mm
And I think what I've been learning as somebody who is hopefully going to formally enter the church soon, God willing, is
mm
that it's totally backwards. That actually my relationship leads to a natural compunction, which is to
mm
say that it's like when you love someone so much, you don't want to hurt them, you know?
hmm
You don't want to let them down, you don't want to betray them. Like my wife Victoria, like if I do something that is genuinely mean or off-putting or rude, if I'm really relating to her, like my heart is
mm
gonna feel that hurt.
Absolutely.
And then I'm
Yeah.
gonna want to repent, which is to say to make amends, to
hmm
amend to
hmm
amend my life, to
Right.
change my mind through doing behaviors that are more loving, but it starts
hmm
with a relationship, not behavior. And it seems like in
Correct.
the West, we put it backwards and we start with behavior and we're desperate to get to relationship, but we never get there because we're always
mm
stuck in behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. A good example of that, there's two points I'd like to make. The first one is there's a passage. I think it's in the Gospel of John. I'd have to look it up exactly, where Jesus says, "If you love me, you will obey my commands." And I can distinctly remember as a teenager interpreting that, reverse engineering it, and saying, "Ah, here's how I can prove I love God. I just have to obey his commands." And it was so profoundly backwards. Looking back on it, hindsight's 2020. But I realized, wow, I actually turned that around and thought it was just a mathematical equation. If 2 plus 2 equals 4, then 4 broken apart must equal 2 plus 2. So I can just reverse engineer this thing. And the
Exactly.
reality is that's exactly the problem we're facing is I don't do the like in my marriage, I do the right things because I love her.
Exactly.
It's
Right.
not if I do the right things, then I love her. It's
Hmm.
not the other way around, right? But we always try to reduce it. And this leads into the second point I wanted to make, which is there's a great book that I need to reread again, and because it's always good to get these things back into our soul. But there's a book called Parenting Towards the Kingdom by Dr. Philip Mamalakis, who is I think he's the associate pastoral care professor at Holy Cross. Fantastic man. I've had the joy of taking several of his classes. But in this book, he talks about children and parenting, and he says children are not objects to be managed, but persons to be connected with. And
Mm.
that is so profound because as a parent, you get so overwhelmed with everything going on in your life, and you're so busy and you're so self-absorbed. And then when your child has a question or is either innocent or is actually acting up, it doesn't matter what they're doing, you are irritated and short with them, and you just want to like manage the situation, put them in a box and move on. In other words, you're looking for an output from them. Be quiet, sit still, whatever it is.
Yep.
Instead of taking the time, slowing down, which is, you could say, self-emptying. You got to take up a little cross right there, and your agenda has to die a little bit, and you slow down, you connect with that person. And when you do that, sometimes you are blown away by the answer, by the results. You're like, oh my gosh, the reason this kid was doing this is because they loved me and they really wanted to connect with me. Or, you just misinterpret stuff so bad when we're trying to just manage people and manage outcomes. So I think that really speaks to the the focus on performance as a way, in some cases, I think what's at the heart of it is it's an avoidance of the cross. It's an avoidance of the costly grace, the costly work to enter into relationship. If I can keep you at a distance and put a few inputs and get a few outputs, and as long as that transaction works, then I don't actually have to die for you in any small way or large way. I can keep you separate
And,
enough, and I
and
remain an
you're the
individual.
God who's deciding when you do what.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
didn't mean to
risky.
interrupt you.
No, no, no. You're good. That's exactly it. It's risky.
Yeah, it's saying that, I'll follow the commandments, so, as long as it's on my calendar, and it's when I
Yeah.
decided that I wanted to do it. And I
Yep.
recently talked about on a previous YouTube video with my caregiving situation with my wife, who's been struggling with chronic illness and has been bedbound for
Mm,
years.
mm,
It's been, I think without her, God bless her soul, I would not be becoming an Orthodox Christian because I wouldn't have
mm.
realized how much I needed Christ in my life. And I wouldn't realized how
Sure.
much, how important it is to participate in the self-emptying process because I don't
Mm,
get to decide when she needs me, right? Like
yeah.
she could need me right now in the middle of this conversation.
Yep.
I'm the only caregiver here. It's so in my mind, I can be like, oh, that's major inconvenience, and I don't get to
Mm,
continue this conversation with Nolan, and now I got to go be with her, and I can kind of rush through it and treat her as an
right.
object that's in my way,
Yep.
right? You're in the
Yep.
way of this podcast I'm supposed to be doing on love, right? Right? Like that's how absurd we
The
are.
irony. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's
So, but it's
ridiculous.
helped me to identify those impulses in
Mm,
myself
hmm.
because I think you nailed it. The impulse for individualistic moral justification for control is a resistance to self-emptying.
Yeah.
It's a resistance to the cross. And
Hmm.
that this idea of becoming a person and the idea of the face, the mask. We often think of a mask as a disguise or as a
Mm,
buffer or as an avoidance, like I'm wearing a mask.
mhm, mhm,
But what he's doing in this text is profound because he's saying, no, your participation, the role, right? Because masks are also derived from role play in theater.
mm,
The
mm,
role that you're playing is your personhood,
mm.
not an escape, not an avoidance. That we've
Right.
created this cultural idea of the persona
Mm,
or the mask that we wear because we're not really there.
mhm,
So we don't
mhm.
actually embody what is meant by the idea of showing up. It's
Right.
like we're not really showing up and performing the role. It'd be like an actor who shows up on stage and isn't giving it his all, you
Mhm,
know, and we all
mhm.
know the difference, right? We know the difference
Sure.
between when Denzel Washington is so immersed in his role, you really believe him. You believe that
Yeah.
he's that guy, right? Because he's
Right.
self-emptying into the role. So there's like I'm kind of giving sort of an archetypal flavor to this conversation and saying
Mm,
like we can point to examples of self-emptying and actually
mm.
embodying the role, and we know that it's true because it resonates as deeply engaging.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when we're not engaged, we're missing the Christian ethic. We're not
Mhm,
there. It's like
mhm.
you're with your kids, but you're on your phone reading emails or
Right.
whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah. Totally. I love that theme of the role. It may be tangential to the conversation, but I think it ties in. Is there's a pet peeve of mine where if when people will advise their children to call me by my first name, like Mr. Nolan or something. And the reason I resist that is there's this tendency for adults to not want to be adults, to not want to take on the responsibility of being a role model, of actually fulfilling that role in society. And so when someone calls me when a child calls me Mr. Brown, it calls me to rise to that role of I'm being looked up to. I should be an adult now. I should, and I imagine in my mind like, the grandfatherly figure who has, a certain look about him or a certain maturation about him, or even the grandmother who has a particular role that they're playing, and it comes out in their adornment, it comes out in the way they handle themselves, their mannerisms. Or we think back, one of my wife's favorite movies is Pride and Prejudice, and we think about that era and the sense of roles that were played in society and their you could call it pretentious, but there's definitely a sense of respect for the positions that people had. And I think we've lost a lot of that in our culture. Some of it's good to do away with, but I think we've maybe gone too far where now nothing is sacred, nothing is calling us to honor, nothing is calling us to embody this mature and responsible mode of being, which I think is actually a big reason why we see so many men coming into the Orthodox Church, is that it is actually calling them to something similar to like the military. The military calls you to be more than you can be, or be all you can be, or whatever the phrase is. But there's something to that is also about being a person. If I avoid personhood by not entangling myself with relationships, then I can be an individual without any responsibility, but I actually have now robbed myself of living, of what
Yes.
life is, right?
Yes, and we have a tendency to reduce our roles to the functions that they play for our individualism.
Mm,
So,
yeah,
well, I'm playing this
that's
role
good.
because I got to pay the bills, and
Right.
I gotta do this because it serves my goals, my
Mm,
idea of myself. I'm gonna go help that person because then I'll feel better about me.
right.
All that stuff, which is totally understandable. Like, and I think I've raised my hand over here. It's like, how many times a day do I catch myself in that sort of behavior?
Mm,
You know what I mean?
mm,
But we're
mhm,
being invited through the freedom of morality to participate in a new way,
mhm,
which is to take up that cross and to struggle with it, but also to embrace the glory that
mm,
is in the help of the
mhm,
Holy Spirit, because I think it's a precondition, right? It's like we have a comforter if we take the leap. You talked to me about one of your dear friends the other day who used to jump out of
Mm,
airplanes, and you used the
hmm.
example in a private conversation we were having about how you have to jump to find out, right? And
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, Orthodox Christianity is a jump, right? Like I'm
Yep.
I'm obeying a spiritual father, right?
Hmm.
Well, I mean, not perfectly, but trying, like struggling to obey.
So congratulations, you've
Yeah.
arrived. You've arrived. You're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Struggling to obey, and
Sure.
was setting that as the expectation,
Yeah.
right? So I have an ideal, right? But that ideal is like I don't decide exactly what my fasting rule is going to be or what my prayer rule is going to be.
Hmm.
I suggest, what do you think about this, Father? And I
Right.
trust that as a member of the sacred body of Christ, that his instruction is going to be holy for me, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that I might have judgments. I might have an idea of like, well, I really should be doing more fasting. But he said
Hmm.
I only have to do this much on my
Yeah.
fasting rule because of my unique experience. But like that's still me being an individualistic
Sure.
identity instead of
Yeah.
conforming my life to the pattern of the church.
Yeah.
And that's the next to just kind of to use that as a transition piece, Nolan, is that what Yannaras does really well in this book is he shows us how the sacramental life of the church
Mm-hmm.
is not an objective process of check boxes that we're trying
Hmm.
to fulfill for behavioral justification. But the
Right.
sacramental life of the church is a pattern that has been laid out for us by Christ's life and instruction,
Hmm.
which has saving and healing power because it invites us into a process of relationship so that
Hmm.
these are not man-made ceremonies. These
Hmm.
are sacramental transfiguring processes which invite us into a holy transcendent relationship with the Lord.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, something I think is a very, very palpable way of capturing what you just said in a in maybe a more relatable to everyday life way would be the relationship between an athlete and a coach, um, compared to a student and a teacher in the sense of an academic setting. So if we take, this athlete that wants to become an athlete at, let's just say, the Olympic level, I don't know what you want to be, an Olympic ping pong player, or a bobsled guy, whatever it is. If you go into the relationship with your coach saying, this is who I want to become, then you're trusting that that coach knows the practices, the rhythms, the behaviors, the way of life that is necessary, and can look at your current state, your current condition, and prescribe the right routines, the right exercises, the right habits to form you into the person you want to become. In an academic setting, it's similar, but there's an abstraction, right? It's not about becoming, it's about completing.
Mhm,
So you've got a test and you need to score a certain score on it. So you study and you get all the right information, but it's an abstracted thing. It's
mhm,
it's knowledge. It's not you're not having to actually execute physically or do this. So I think there's a difference there when we think about, are we trying to achieve a moral outcome, an ethical outcome, or are we trying to become healthy and alive and more than we are? And I think that dichotomy allows us to see really the difference is, I don't want to become someone who knows all the right things to do, but is wretched. And that was my experience as a pastor's kid growing up in the non-denominational world. I was sick to my stomach about how much I knew, but how little I could do. I wasn't becoming a more loving husband or a more faithful Christian. I was doing all the right things, but I felt powerless. I
mm,
couldn't find the transformation I was looking for. And it wasn't until I encountered the Orthodox Church that I began to experience a rhythm of sacramental life. And I don't even necessarily like the word sacrament, because even that is rooted in a like legal oath kind of is it epistemology? Entomology, that's the word. Like the roots of those words are all still legal
Mm-hmm.
terminology. In the East, we call it their mysteries, the divine mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
So we participate in these mysteries. Well, it's just like weightlifting. Isn't that a mystery? I move some stuff around and suddenly I get stronger. Like, how does that? I don't know how it works, but if I do it, it produces the results and I am changed. I become more than what I was.
Right.
And it's through participation. It's
Oh,
not
that's
through,
so good. Yeah.
it's, yeah. I mean,
That's
I
such
use
a
that
good point.
analogy with prayer a lot is prayer is all too often reduced into the behaviors that we call prayer.
Right.
But prayer is a state of being, just like strength is a state of being.
Right.
And there are practices of strength. We can weight lift, we could do Pilates, we could, whatever. There's all kinds of things that increase strength. If we don't do it, it diminishes. But what is it to be strong? Well, it's a continuum.
Yes.
It's a state of being. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very well said. And it reminds me of an insight that I've been blessed with recently, which is that I think it's often a tendency to want to be saved by Christ without going the whole way with him. In
Mm,
essence, show me that you're real. Show
hmm
me that like prove to me that this is real because like there's
mm,
always that sort of lingering and I think it's a product of our Western thinking too, this lingering doubt that, what if this is just a fantasy or what if this is
right.
not real? But that kind of belies an ontological assumption about what do we really mean by faith and what do we really mean by belief?
Yeah.
Do we mean like a statement that we say? And I've heard Father
Mm,
Evan say something similar to this, but what I'm thinking is that no, the revelation of Christ is what happens in my life when I
mm,
do what he says in relationship faithfully to him. In essence, like
hmm
I jump out of that airplane. It's like,
Right.
okay, today is a fast day. I'm going to give it my best today, and I'm just
hmm
new to that, by the way, Nolan. Like
Sure. Yep.
it's something that I'm learning. But with the prayer rule, I've been practicing longer. It's like, okay, I'm going to do my best to follow this pattern
Right.
and find out what happens. Or I'm going to
hmm
repeat the Jesus prayer. And I'm going to read the gospels regularly. And I'm going to see how I can live my life according to what the scriptures are saying.
Yeah.
And when I do that, watch what happens.
hmm
Now,
hmm
yeah, sure. Would it be a blessing if Christ came to me physically and showed and said, put your hands here, like he did to
mm
Thomas,
Right. Yeah.
that this is real? Yes, that would be a blessing. But I think perhaps even more of a blessing is to have the inner relationship with Christ that is embodied in my life.
hmm
That when I'm caring for Victoria, I notice that through following him by his grace, not my own grace, the
hmm
sinner that I am, that I become more and more loving and less preoccupied with, wow, we've been in this situation for years and
mm
when are we going to be able to get our life back? And no, this
mm
is our life. This is our life.
Yeah.
It's not, life isn't somewhere else waiting. My life right now is showing up and caring for her. And that's what Christ calls me to do. And he doesn't just call me to go through the motions and make
mm
sure that she's nourished and fed and that she doesn't get infections, etc., but that I am actually participating as a person through self-emptying and that
hmm
enjoying I'm enjoying the process. I'm enjoy
Yeah.
in terms of like my love for her and that I'm in gratitude that I actually get to spend this time with my wife. How
Right.
many spouses have to spend hours and hours away from each other every day, and here I am, and I get to spend my whole day with my
hmm
spouse. I get to spend my whole day loving her. I get to spend my whole day helping her with what she needs. And I get
Yeah.
to do that for Christ. And I get to observe and watch the tendencies in my own spiritual immaturity, to use your
Sure.
language,
Sure.
where I miss that mark and I get to try to
mm
become a better archer and hit it more every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
That to me is the incarnation in my life. That's the
Amen.
incarnation that I need. That's the testimony that I need. That's the
Yeah.
evidence. It's not
Yeah.
blind faith. It's be in a relationship with Christ through scripture, through worship, through Orthodox faithfulness and
Hmm.
participation in his body and watch and find out what happens. That's the evidence I needed. And that's what's happening. And and God willing it continues because I think I'm
Hmm.
very, very like infantile in all this. But I think it's really helpful to approach Christ in that way for me.
Hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's so
Thank you,
beautiful.
brother.
And you're absolutely right. It's a journey of maturation, but that only happens when we can orient our will towards that journey and desiring it. And something you said is enjoying it. That flies in the face of most modern thinking. Like, how can I enjoy something well, it reminds me of like type 2 fun, right? Like, I'm gonna go suffer like Goggins or something. I'm gonna go out there and just suffer and really enjoy it. It's like, how,
Hmm.
how does that compute? Well, we
Hmm.
know that it's good for us. We know that we're becoming more, even though there's this aspect of us that would rather be lazy, devolve, disintegrate. And it's like we have this war going on inside between the guy who wants to stay on the couch and
Hmm.
become nothing and the guy who wants to go and like run 5 miles and become something. And therein lies that asceticism, that struggle and that suffering, not for the sake of suffering, but for the sake of the other, for the sake of love. Because if it can get too easily distracted that we are motivated to become for our own personal
Hmm.
uh in gratification or achievement.
Hmm.
Those things can bear fruit, but they're short-lived because they don't sustain. Ultimately, what sustains is love, and true joy is derived not by everything going well, but by a deeper orientation towards love and participation in that, which that's that word that we have in Orthodoxy. In Greek is harmolipe, but it's bright sadness or joyful sorrow. uh, it struck me
Hmm.
several years ago that there's this idea that beauty does not have to be pleasing. There are things that are beautiful that are not necessarily pleasing. What comes to mind would be, a military funeral with a widow and her two small kids, and there's the casket draped with the flag. That's beautiful because it's a picture of sacrifice, a picture of honor, a
Hmm.
picture of sorrow and loss. But there is a beauty to it that is not necessarily pleasing. It's uncomfortable, and
Hmm.
I think we see that tension lived out in this self-emptying love. Like the cross itself is beautiful, but definitely not pleasing. It's very sorrowful. It's
Hmm.
full of contrition. So, um, yeah, yeah, it's such a beautiful journey that we're on as we navigate these things. But I mean, to bring it back to the book, I think that there's a freedom that comes when we can embrace the the beauty of the journey and the process in a positive orientation where we're saying, hey, like you said, the archer who is missing the mark doesn't beat himself up over it. He's continuing to shoot so that he can hit the mark.
Hmm.
And then once he hits the mark, he realizes it's time to raise the bar a bit and you move the target back a bit. And there's always growth, but it's a joyful journey of
Yeah.
growth. It's not like, oh, I'm such a wretch. I missed the mark. I missed the target. I'm a
Right.
sinner, you know.
Yeah, we have as our example the saints who are
Mm,
the master archers. And
yeah,
and how folly is it, foolish is it to look at them and expect that, oh, I can do that right now. Oh,
right.
I'll and then beat myself up when I can't, fast the way they fast or
Hmm. Yeah,
practice purity the way they practice it or whatever it is.
yeah,
But that I have an example to move towards, just like a
totally.
little kid that watches the NBA. He's like,
Yeah,
wow, like I want to learn to shoot like that. But you wouldn't beat himself up because he went
sure.
out there and he didn't have the same jump shot as Steph Curry. He would,
Totally.
if he
Totally.
was in his right mind, he would just keep starting where he is and working his way up. And then who knows, maybe one day he will be in the NBA. We don't know.
Totally. Yeah.
Who knows who's
You know what it
destined.
reminds me of? I'm going to take your analogy, I'll twist it into hockey because
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
real life experience. My youngest, he's 7 and he plays hockey. Plays hockey. I mean, he got his first goal, but it's,
Nice.
at that age, they're just chasing the puck, right? The whole crowd, the whole group, and they're falling down every 5 seconds. But he got to go and do a like halftime. or in between second and third period, there was a chance for him and all of his little buddies to go and do some stuff on the ice at like a high school game. And there was a point at which all the high school players were going back onto the ice, and they're big and they're fast and they're doing things. And he was like giving them fist bumps, and he was so thrilled to see these high school kids play. So in his mind, he's like, whoa, these high school kids are unbelievable.
Hmm.
But to the high school kid, they're like, have you ever seen Wayne Gretzky? Have you
Right,
ever seen
exactly.
like these dudes? So I think this is where when we see ourselves as the 7-year-old who's just beginning the spiritual life, and we look to the saints who are like these high school kids who are much further along,
Yeah,
but the saints themselves are going, I'm the chief of all sinners because I'm the chief of all the guys who missed the mark, not I'm
right.
a wretch. Like that's not what they're saying. Because they have seen the Wayne Gretzky level, they have seen Christ more
Yes,
clearly.
that's a
And so
great
they're
point.
it's like this three-layer thing where we look to the saints as like, oh, I really want to become like them.
Right.
But they are self-reflective as like, man, I'm nobody yet. Like, look at the pros, Jesus, right? So it's kind
Yeah,
of cool.
and I feel like part of humility is being realistic about what we can accomplish in a day or in a week about our
Right.
spiritual goals, right? Like, and that's why it's so important to have a
Absolutely.
spiritual father because we wanna work within the bounds of where our journey is right now,
Sure.
and then we who knows, one day some of us might reach a higher level, and but the point is that to have the humility, it's
Totally.
spiritual ambition can also be dangerous. Like,
Can.
um, not that it's like some of it can be probably useful, like wanting to be more loving and wanting to be
Hmm.
more Christ-like. I think that's all very holy.
Yeah.
And forgive me if I'm uh, saying anything that's anti-Orthodox. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like
No.
to me that to be realistic about where we are,
Hmm.
to be sober in our judgment of ourselves, as St. Paul says, and not to use that as an excuse, but to use that
Mm.
as a measuring stick about like what can I do today that would please Christ, that would be within
Yeah.
something that I can manage.
Totally.
What do you
Totally.
think about that?
I think that there is a beauty in aspiring to be like Christ.
Yeah.
And when we see the saints, we see them for how much they've become like Christ. And so our aspiration, our goal, that's what motivates us. Because if we are wanting to be the kind of person who lays their life down for the other, that's just indicative of the orientation of our will. That should not manifest itself into spiritual pride. That's a temptation we have to constantly guard against. And frankly, that's why Jesus lit up the Pharisees every chance he got, is because they were walking around in a moralistic, performance-based ethic where I've checked all the boxes, I've followed the law. And so they were self-righteous. And so he constantly came against that. That was the spiritual pride. You see that with the publican and the Pharisee, where the publican's over there beating his breast in the back of the synagogue, saying, I'm not even worthy to look up. And the Pharisee's like, man, I'm thankful I'm not like that sinner,
Hmm.
that publican. It's like, oh, the spiritual pride side of it is horribly, horribly tricky. But I think it is rooted in devolving into a transactional theology, a I come up with these quippy little sayings. One of them is Christ didn't die so I don't have to. He died to show me how to.
Wow.
And another one is Jesus didn't die to balance the books. He died to save us from accounting. Like
That's great.
that's
That's
the
really
entire,
good, Nolan.
like
That's
it's
really
not
good.
the point. But we're so fixated, and actually that's a form of spiritual pride.
Yeah.
When I judge myself as unworthy of God's love, who am I?
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
making myself God. I'm making myself the one who gets to say what God's opinion of me should be.
Right.
Like that's
Right. The other
uh,
one is like if you're a runner and you haven't ran, you want to be a runner. You haven't ran in like a year, right? And
mm,
you start with a marathon. Like that's not wise.
no,
It's like that's why we need a spiritual father that says,
that's right.
start with this and see if you
Yeah,
can manage it.
absolutely.
If you do well with the small things, then you'll be given more, like Christ says in the scripture.
It's just
Um,
like a good coach again,
yeah,
right? Like
and
like would a good coach tell you go run the marathon today? Like that would just
yeah.
injure you and you'd be done with running. You wouldn't.
So I think the pertinent question is how can I be faithful with the spiritual life I've been given,
Mm,
you know?
hmm.
And God will judge how I do with that, right? But we'll
Yeah,
also give me opportunities to, if I do well with it, to do more, and to not to do more from an objective behavioral stance, but to become more Christ-like and to
Yeah,
live more in his joy and live more in his glory, because I think he wants us all to participate in the fullness of his glory, you know?
absolutely.
But I'm trying to instruct myself in the way of humility, which is to say, like, I would like to be the person who, if if I enter into the kingdom of heaven, which ideally is here on earth, I would
Mm,
be content to sweep the floors. I've heard
mm,
this said in Orthodox circles, and forgive me because I don't remember exactly what its original source is, but I think that that is a good goal, and it
hmm.
helps me realize like where I do have ambitions or pride that kind of like if
Sure.
if I'm not content to sweep the floors, then I've got some work to do on humility and sort of just
Right.
repenting into this more loving self-emptying, and pray. I think praying for humility is valuable for me because, okay, like let's say I've made this much progress or maybe not in humility. Maybe like it's
Mm,
just it's not going very well or whatever. But can I ask God to help me with it? And then like,
yeah,
watch what you ask for, because I have been given more and more opportunities to become more
sure.
humble, and it's like you look, if you want the things of this world, you have your reward. So like I'm praying for humility, and
Totally.
what I'm saying is like whatever the cost might be here in the world, like
Yeah.
however, if I'm slandered, or if it hurts my reputation or whatever, what matters most is that can I become someone who can accept Christ's love? Not can he love me, but can I be
Hmm.
loved by him? Can I do the humble work so that my heart is
Yeah.
receptive to his, because he is meek and he is low. And if I'm, my uncle said something really interesting the other day. He said most people who don't understand Christ are looking way too high.
Mm,
They have way too complex of an idea of God.
hmm.
He said you have to
Hmm.
bend over way, way low to see God.
Mm. It's good.
And
I
I
like that.
thought that was so beautiful.
Yes, it absolutely is. Very beautiful. I love that. I love that. It's something that struck me is this idea of progress and how we keep track of progress in our spiritual life. And I think that that's actually a misnomer. And the reason is, as I think about my own marriage or any other relationship for that matter, it's like, how do I measure progress in my marriage? Like that doesn't really make much sense. Um, it's more of a a consideration of my commitment. Am I
Mm,
showing up? I could
yes.
count the years that I've been married, but I wouldn't say, necessarily that every year has been as fruitful as others as cultivating the relationship. So I just feel it. I just know it. It's more of a
Yeah.
qualitative thing than it is a quantitative thing.
Yeah, because then we're back to the test in the school version you talked about rather than the
Exactly.
coaching version.
Exactly. So I think it's very, very, it's another temptation to fall into a performative, um, almost legalistic construct around our faith and our relationship, which again, it's
Amen.
almost like a black hole. We constantly fall back into religion. One of my professors at Holy Cross um, constantly says Jesus did not come to establish another religion. He came to be the end of all religion, because
Hmm.
religion is a construct to try to orient ourselves towards achieving a certain moral level, or to reach God, man trying to reach God. And what Christ did that's so contrary to all of that is it's God came to be man. And it's about relationship, not religion. But
Amen.
yeah,
I couldn't have said it
yeah,
any better. But I think one of the cool things about this conversation, although from the
yeah.
Western objective behaviorist standpoint, this would be considered a horrible book review. But from the perspective of Yannaras himself, who wrote the book, we actually discussed the book in a way that's very faithful to what he wrote, which is to say that we, instead of systematically taking apart the propositions and
Mm,
dissecting the different themes of the book and reviewing it based on its ideological credentials and assessing it based on what our opinions are of how close
mm,
to the mark is it, we instead used it as a launch point for a dialogue of personhood between two
Yeah.
persons who are living a personal life. So, if you want to know what this book is about, I think listening to this discussion inside, just getting a vibe for the way that it unfolded is a kind of an
Mhm.
intuitive appraisal of what the book is. We can't certainly do justice to the brilliance of this book. I mean, this book
Absolutely.
was magnificent, and we only touched on maybe 5% of it. Is there anything you want to add before we close, Nolan, to say about this book or the work that you do?
I think that it's essential for us in each generation. There's a responsibility to translate the gospel into the modern vernacular and into words that we can resonate at a human level with people. And I think that this book does that at least at an academic level. It might be unapproachable for some. I know my wife would never read it. She just is not interested. She's very intelligent, but she's like, that ain't my thing.
Hmm.
So it is, though, important, I think, as a whole, for us to realize that the temptation to slip into transactional, performative theology exists even within our Orthodox circles. There's an unfortunate reality that that's a fact. And so as we navigate these things, I always try to hold in tension that the persons I encounter, no matter what their faith confession, no matter what type of church they go to or don't go to, the person's heart is oriented towards love or not. And that is something that is true. The institution, however, needs to be assessed for what the institution is and
Mm.
what it promotes. And there's usually a very big difference in that. I mean, I've met some of the most beautiful, more Christ-like people that have no idea or orientation towards anything theological than some of the most, or myself, we could say. I don't want to bash anyone else, but there's plenty of Pharisees out there, and they go to all kinds of churches or not churches, and there's plenty of beautiful, humble people who are doing the best they can with what they have. And I think that this it's another aspect that you don't have to know all of the right things to respond with love. You don't have to be an academic to be a theologian. To be a true theologian is to be someone who knows God. And if
Mhm.
you know God and you love people and you're self-emptying, you're a greater theologian than the person who can, talk about the hypostatic union, whatever. So it's
Yeah.
it's it's profound. It really is. But no, it's been such a joy. I really appreciate this conversation. It won't be the last, I hope. I hope we'll do it
I
again.
sure hope not. I feel like I have so much more to learn from you, and
Mm.
like
Oh,
I
likewise.
alluded to in the beginning, like I would not be an Orthodox inquirer, catechumen if it was not for you. And
Oh, glory
I
to
have a
God.
tendency to call myself Orthodox more and more in my heart because I'm so aligned with this faith, and I'm so excited to formally enter the church,
Mm.
hopefully in April. And I just want to say God bless you for helping me with that
Oh,
and
glory to God.
for being so open because I would have been put off if you approached me in our initial conversations over a year ago with sort of a juridical
Mm.
Christian worldview, and it would have
Mm.
probably left me out in this space of, well, I have Christ, but I don't need anything else in terms of communion or in terms of being a
Mm.
participant in the church. And there's a very important part of all this, Nolan, where the the proper manifestations of the church I've learned are actually safeguarding something
Mm.
incredibly, incredibly sacred, which is Christ Himself. In
Yeah.
that, doing it on my own risks a lot, including spiritual
Oh, yes.
delusion,
Oh,
which
man.
they call prelest, including
Mhm.
pride, including just generally falling into the pits of self-sufficiency. That's another word he used in this book,
Mm.
self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
And it's probably a good note to end on because self-sufficiency, it's all about survival.
Mhm.
And how can I use the resources within and around me so that I can get my needs met?
I'm reminded of the end scene of Titanic.
Uh-huh, go.
You just see who the people become whenever
Yes.
they're just in survival mode. It's yeah.
And that's why the message, the life of Christ, teaches us the true life, which is
Mhm.
that beyond all of our personal instincts for survival, which are going to be there, and he does a good job making sure we understand that in this book.
Mm.
But if we truly are being Christ-like, we are willing to risk losing the self-sufficient constraints of our existence and possibly dying for that.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
that like that is the legacy of the martyrs and how they are the greatest testimony that I can, in my very novice opinion, think of.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. 100%.
Because they're willing to put personhood over individualism, and
Yeah.
and they show their faith through, hey, I believe in the eternal life so much that this one is going to be treated as nothing to me,
Mm.
even if it risks short-term pain.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's an opportunity and an invitation, because what are all the little crosses that I can bear every day
Yeah.
to just try to inch my way towards that just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
well, God bless you, Nolan. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank
I
you.
know you have to go, and please, if you're willing, I'd love to do more of these with you.
Yeah. Let's do it. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Ryan.
Awesome. You got it.